even the armor described in the Iliad and the Odyssey. But now I want to know, if the Greek army really traveled to Troy to wage war, how did they get there? Did the Greeks of the Late Bronze Age have ships that could make the journey, as Homer described?
If the Trojan War actually happened, the Greek sailors had to somehow cross the Aegean. I've come to the ancient port of Volos, where shipbuilding has gone on for thousands of years. I'm here to meet an admiral who says he can show me how it was done the old-fashioned way.
We have the most...
Rear Admiral Apostolos Kortis and his team are building a pentaconter, one of the earliest in a long line of Greek naval warships. This could be the kind of battleship used in the Trojan War. Bronze Age artwork indicates that warships of the period had a flat front and three main structural elements joined at the stern. Homer's Greek fleet sets off for Troy in boats seating 50 rowers each. The admiral and his team are setting out to build a ship exactly to the scale described.
We have not nails.
No metal nails?
No nails.
So these are
Eventually, they'll test their theory that these boats are fast and maneuverable in the water. But they have to build one first.
Okay, and the tools they're using, these are traditional tools?
Yes, single hand tools.
Hand tools, no machinery.
No.
So during the Trojan War, the shipbuilders had a crew of 50 to build their ships. How big is your crew? 1, 2, 3. So they had 50. You have 3 to 4.
Yes.
For Apostolos and his team, the ship is a labor of love. But it's also an exercise in experimental archaeology. The tools they're using are exact replicas of those found in Mycenaean tombs from the Late Bronze Age.
We have primary findings of this kind of tools.
At the time, these tools were at the cutting edge of technology. The new science of bronze smelting gave shipbuilders a precision in woodworking previously impossible.
That. And then
making only
the bow drill seems slow going, but its hard-working tip, along with other bronze tools like the hammer and chisel, were innovations that helped usher in the bigger, stronger ships of the era.
Okay, so
It's a lot of work for Apostolos, but the framework of his ship is slowly taking shape.
very important point.
He's got plenty left to do. And I still need to prove that the ships from the Late Bronze Age could sail to the other side of the Aegean. I'm heading back to Turkey in search of clues to prove that Mycenaean soldiers, the ancient Greek army, had ships capable of reaching this coast in the Late Bronze Age, as they did in the songs of Homer. Here in Turkey, evidence of such Greek journeys may exist in ancient shipwrecks off the coast. Yaşar Yildiz is the director of the Museum of Underwater Archaeology in Bodrum. He wants to take me to an area with one of the highest concentrations of shipwrecks in the world. In ancient times, reefs like the one we're approaching were incredibly dangerous to mariners. Just below the surface and close to shore, such hazards spelled doom for captains, for as long as ships have been crossing into this region. And it's in these waters that a Trojan War-era shipwreck was discovered and excavated. Yaşar says I can see remains from that ship later in the museum back on shore. But first, I'm going for a dive.
And no, I'm not diving with a hat.
There's no telling what archaeological treasures might remain along this coast. These waters have become world famous for their scuba diving, and no wonder. Immediately, a world of decaying shipwrecks is visible. As Yaşar guides me deeper, it becomes obvious that the modern wreck is just one of many. Clearly, this pot did not come from that big steel ship. This huge modern anchor chain has come to rest on a pile of ancient pottery. Litter, nearly 2,000 years old. Honestly, this is the most incredible dive site I've ever seen. For archaeologists, this is a gold mine. It's obvious that sunken ships and cargo like this can provide incredible insight into the lives of ancient civilizations. But what can it teach us about the Trojan War?
That was a good dive. I gotta shake your hand for that. Can I get over there? That was a great dive.
Great dive, yes.
Great dive.
Yashar tells me that the wrecks we just saw below date backwards from 1960 to around 150 AD. Sites like this one have provided archaeologists with a wealth of information about the nautical history of the area. But none is more important to my quest than a Bronze Age galley discovered in 1982. Its cargo is on display at the Bodrum Museum of Underwater Archaeology. Dr. Jamal Pulak directed excavations on the shipwreck Ulu Burun.
So I've looked at 2nd century AD shipwreck. This, much older.
Yes.
Can you tell me the story?
That's 2nd century AD.
Yeah.
This is 14th century BC, so this is 1,500 years older than the wreck that you've been on. It's the oldest shipwreck to have been excavated and also has the wealthiest and the most diverse cargo ever found from the Bronze Age.
In the scattered remains of the wreck, Jamal and his team discovered copper plates from the Middle East, pottery from what's now Syria, Israel, Lebanon, and Cyprus, elephant tusks and ebony logs from equatorial Africa, colored glass and tin from Central Asia, and gold from Egypt.
What it does tell us that the greater part of the Mediterranean in antiquity was connected extensively with trade networks.
Do we know where it was going to?
I think it was going to Greece or Greek mainland because there were also Mycenaeans or Bronze Age Greeks on board.
Really?
Based on the finds, yes, I think we had at least two Mycenaeans on board because we have two swords, we have two seals, we have two pectorals or glass beads that the Mycenaean elite wore. Everything that you can imagine that a wealthy individual, an elite individual would carry. So I think they represented emissaries or envoys that were on board the ship, escorting the vessel to their homeland.
Ulu Burun was a cargo ship, not a warship. So this was not the Greek galley of the Trojan War. But it proves that the world of the Mediterranean and Aegean seas were connected in the late Bronze Age through an established system of seagoing trade. And it proves that Greeks from Mycenae were intimately involved. They were a rich and powerful trading empire. And they were clearly more than capable of reaching the city of Troy by sea, armed for war. I'm on the trail of the Trojan War, following clues from the Iliad and the Odyssey. I've journeyed through both Greece and Turkey to learn that a world of fierce warriors and incredible riches did exist, much as the poet Homer described. I've crossed the Aegean Sea, and beneath its clear waters, discovered evidence that the Greek army could have sailed to Troy armed for war. Now, I'm going back to Troy to find out what scientists have learned at what would have been the battlefield itself. The scars left by Heinrich Schliemann's excavations at Troy remain today. Within his massive trench and across the ancient city, archaeologists have continued his search for evidence of the Trojan War. I'm back with Dr. Yashar Ersoy, who wants to tell me what scientists have discovered since Schliemann. Archaeologists now agree that for over 3,200 years, civilizations, one after another, flourished here and collapsed. 9 cities were built and destroyed, and the ruins here at Troy contain remains from all of them. In his zeal to discover Homer's Troy, It appears Heinrich Schliemann dug far deeper than he ever had to. His brutal excavations likely destroyed much of the evidence he'd hoped to find. But enough clues did remain for later archaeologists to determine which city layer here was contemporary with the period Homer describes. Shards of pottery similar in style to what I saw back at Mycenae were found in the 6th level of Troy, in abundance. These artifacts were some of the major clues archaeologists used to identify the 6th level as Homer's Bronze Age Troy. But according to Yashar, it wasn't the Mycenaean Greeks who destroyed it.
This is from the 6th settlement.
Level 6.
Level 6, okay. Which is actually contemporary with the Mycenaean Greeks. It was reached to an end by a major destruction.
Some sort of catastrophe.
That is exactly the case.
Wow. Now, if you put it in the 13th century BC, this is around the time that people attribute Homer's writings and the Trojan War to have happened.
It is contemporary, but it is beyond the limits of the human agency. The cause of this event must have been not by the human agency, but instead it was a natural disaster, namely an earthquake.
An earthquake? Wow, okay. And that's shown in the archaeological record how?
Buildings were collapsed, walls were dismantled, fortification systems were partly disintegrated. So it seemed like this was a severe catastrophic event, which caused the end of the 6th settlement at Troy.
For Yashar, discoveries at Troy so far point to natural disaster and not war as the cause of the destruction of the Bronze Age city. This appears to be the city from the songs of the Iliad and the Odyssey. But concrete proof of Homer's 10-year war has not been found so far.
So what would archaeologists need to be able to say the Trojan War is a true historical event?
The physical evidence of it, the destructions, the destruction of the structures by fire, by human agency, corpses laying on the streets with the weaponry that they carried. That kind of tragic evidence will be enough to say that. Otherwise, we are basically trapped.
The smoking gun, so to speak, the archaeological evidence that we would need to say this happened, yeah, it's missing.
They are so far missing, unfortunately.
Okay.
For more than 130 years, archaeologists have been on a quest to prove that the war described by Homer was a real historical event. The Iliad and Odyssey have proven to be invaluable treasure maps, which have led to great riches. But more importantly, they've led to the very cities Homer described. They've given us the gift of a marvelous insight into the weapons, the cultures, and the technologies of the late Bronze Age. But for the archaeologist, required to make judgments from evidence, not conjectures, it seems that the Trojan horse, Agamemnon's warriors at the doorstep of the strong-walled city, and the beautiful Helen of Troy can only be said to have lived for certain in the songs of an ancient poet.